The key was brass, heavy, and tarnished an ugly dark shade of green. But the broken part wasn't the metal, it was the mechanism. The teeth were worn down almost smooth in one spot, and the head of the key had a hairline fracture running straight down the middle, like a lightning strike had been frozen in time. Ethan, my older brother, didn't hand it to me with any ceremony. He just tossed it onto my coffee table next to a stack of unpaid bills and a takeout menu. He looked utterly relieved to be rid of it, like he was passing off a financial hand grenade. "It's yours now, Jack, all yours. The tax bill, the property line disputes, the squirrel infestation, everything. The key barely works, but neither does the cabin, so it's fitting." That was the last time we talked about Whispering Pines without shouting, which tells you everything you need to know about that place's reputation in our family. The cabin had been in the family for 3 generations. It was the backdrop for every single idyllic summer memory we had. Fishing in the creek, campfire stories that stretched into the cold, sharp hours of the morning, and the taste of burnt marshmallows that still tasted like freedom. But those memories, like the cabin itself, had faded into a kind of sepia-toned regret. For the last 2 decades, Whispering Pines had been nothing more than a bottomless pit of structural issues and escalating property taxes. Ethan had inherited it when our parents passed, and all it had done was drain his savings and his patience. I picked up the key. It felt cold and strangely light, considering the weight of responsibility it carried. "The broken key," I muttered, turning it over in my palm. "Why not just sell it?" Ethan just laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Sell what, Jack? A liability?" The real estate agent told me the structure was too compromised to insure, let alone sell on the open market. He suggested I find a very large bulldozer and call it a day. But I know how much you love that place. So, consider it an early Christmas present. Or maybe just a curse dressed up as an inheritance. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and walked out the door, leaving me alone with the silent mandate of rot and ruin resting on my table. For a week, the key stayed there, mocking me. I had a decent, if unexciting job in city planning, and a life that was comfortable and predictable. Taking on a derelict forest cabin hundreds of miles away was the absolute last thing my sensible, spreadsheet-loving brain wanted. But the image of Whispering Pines, nestled deep in the damp, shadowy embrace of the Redwood National Forest, kept pulling at me. Not the memory of its past glory, but the reality of its decay. I finally got in the car a week later with a toolbox, a respirator, and a kind of reckless desperation I hadn't felt since I was a teenager. The drive was long, winding, and increasingly isolating. When I finally found the dirt road, a barely visible scar in the underbrush, I felt a genuine chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The cabin, when it finally emerged from behind a veil of ancient moss-covered pines, was worse than Ethan had described. The porch sagged like a broken jaw. Half the shingles were gone, leaving the roof looking patchy and diseased. The windows were either shattered or opaque with years of grime, giving the house a blank, sightless stare. The place looked less like a cabin and more like a tomb. I approached the main door, pulling out the infamous broken key. It took 3 frustrating minutes of jiggling, wiggling, and the silent promise to purchase a sledgehammer if it didn't work, before the tumblers finally caught and the lock gave way with a mournful, scraping groan. The smell that hit me was the first thing that truly registered the scope of the disaster. Wet earth, decomposing wood, and the thick, sickly sweet scent of mildew. It was the smell of something dying very slowly. I flicked on my phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing a thick blanket of dust over everything. The furniture was shapeless under white, ghost-like tarps. But what really caught my eye, pushed back into a shadowy corner of the living room, was a massive, water-stained architectural drawing rolled up and tied with fraying twine. I pulled it out, untied the knot, and carefully unrolled the brittle paper. It wasn't the original plans for the cabin. Those were long gone. This was a set of plans, hastily sketched and dated years before our parents bought the property, showing a completely different structure on the same footprint. This plan wasn't for a rustic cabin. It was labeled the sanctuary. My initial plan had been simple: patch the roof, replace the floors, and make it livable enough to sell cheaply. But standing there, breathing in the musty air, looking at the structural beams that were clearly failing, a new, irrational, and completely compelling thought took hold. Why polish a turd? Why try to resurrect a memory? I didn't want to fix the cabin. I wanted to transform it. I looked back at the drawing, the sanctuary, a name that sounded both grandiose and utterly ridiculous for this pile of wood. That's when the idea crystallized, an impossible vision blooming in the darkness. I wouldn't just renovate it. I would gut it, tear it down to the studs, and rebuild a modern, luxurious, off-grid retreat. A destination, a place so removed from the Broken Key legacy that it would redefine the land itself. That night, sleeping fitfully in a cheap motel 45 minutes away, I made a commitment. This wouldn't be a weekend project. This would be my life for the next year. I called an architect friend, a man named Marcus, who specialized in sustainable, high-end mountain builds, and I sent him pictures of the ruin and the cryptic old plans. His first reaction was a string of emojis usually reserved for medical emergencies. His second reaction, though, was the one that validated my craziness. Jack, this place is beyond saving, but the location is priceless. The elevation, the view of the valley. If you can get the permits, we don't fix it. We build a marvel. We build a legacy. The next morning, I returned to Whispering Pines, not as a nostalgic visitor, but as an executioner. I didn't even bother trying to secure the broken lock. I put on safety glasses, and with a satisfying crunch that echoed through the silent forest, I put the first heavy blow of a sledgehammer right through the dry, rotted porch railing. That's when my phone vibrated. It was a text from Ethan. Did you at least find the good fishing spot? Don't forget to check under the floorboards in the kitchen. There's a reason Mom always kept a rug there. The message was cryptic, out of character for the relieved indifference he'd shown earlier, and, honestly, slightly chilling. A reason for the rug? I knew immediately that the broken key wasn't the only piece of history he'd conveniently left behind. I dropped the sledgehammer, put on my respirator, and headed straight back inside. Not toward the living room, but toward the dusty, stained linoleum floor in the dilapidated kitchen, searching for whatever secret was hiding beneath the threadbare family relic. The kitchen floor was the color of forgotten dreams and cheap, decades-old cleaner. The linoleum was cracked and curled at the edges, and the rug Ethan had mentioned was, predictably, the filthiest thing in the entire cabin, matted with mud and history. I kicked it aside and knelt down, scraping at the layer of grit where the rug had been. The floorboards beneath looked exactly like the rest, gray, damp, and utterly unremarkable. But Ethan's message, "There's a reason Mom always kept a rug there," had been too specific, too deliberately vague to ignore. I ran my hands over the surface, testing for any looseness or irregularity. Near the stove's ancient, rusted base, I found it. A slight give, a tiny space where the wood grain didn't quite line up. I jammed the blade of my crowbar into the seam. It took serious leverage, straining my arms and shoulders, but with a sound like tearing fabric, the small section of the floorboard lifted. It wasn't a cellar or a crawl space beneath. It was a tight, shallow cavity lined with rough, unfinished plywood, maybe 2 feet by 1 foot. And inside, sitting perfectly centered, was a sturdy steel lockbox. It wasn't one of those cheap, fireproof boxes you buy at an office supply store. This one was heavy, scarred, and looked like it belonged in a turn-of-the-century bank vault. It had no handle and no keyhole, just a 3-digit combination lock that had seized up with rust and time. I dragged the heavy box out, the dust and debris raining down around me. My heart was actually thumping, a purely cinematic, cliché reaction, but I couldn't help it. This wasn't structural decay or property tax. This was a secret. This was the real inheritance. I tried prying it open. I tried kicking it. I tried dropping it onto the foundation stone. Nothing. That box was built to last longer than the cabin itself. I finally loaded it into my truck and drove it straight to the nearest town, which was still a 40-minute drive, to the one establishment I figured would have the tools I needed. A grizzled old-school locksmith named Hank, who ran a shop that smelled perpetually of oil and old pennies. Hank didn't even look up when I presented the box. He took one look at the seized lock and the scarred metal and simply grunted. "You'll be wanting the acetylene torch for that, son. That ain't getting picked." It took me $50 and the promise of a cold six-pack to convince him to break his own rule about destroying customers' property. The process was slow and dramatic. The tip of the torch glowed cherry red, the air hissed, and finally, with a loud pop that made me jump, the lock mechanism failed. Inside, resting on a bed of faded velvet lining, was a stack of things. The first was a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. The handwriting inside was elegant, looping, and entirely unfamiliar. The second was a single, large sapphire pendant, the kind of jewelry that looked expensive enough to single-handedly pay for my initial demolition crew. And the third item, tucked neatly beneath the pendant, was a deed. Not a deed to the cabin, which was already in my possession, but a deed to an adjacent, undeveloped tract of land. A huge tract. A parcel so large it would multiply the value of the Whispering Pines property exponentially. I drove back to the cabin in a daze, the journal resting on the passenger seat. The sapphire was dazzling, certainly, but the land deed was the game changer. That undeveloped area was the reason the real estate agent had told Ethan the land was uninsurable. It was designated as high-risk, unbuildable wetland. But the deed wasn't recent. It was dated 1947 and was signed by someone named Elias Thorne. Attached to the deed was a note, handwritten in the same elegant script as the journal, saying, "The key is not broken, only sleeping. The sanctuary awaits the sound of the creek." Back at the cabin, sitting on the porch I had just started to dismantle, I began reading the journal. It was written by Elias Thorne, the original owner of the land, the very man who had drawn up the sanctuary plans. Elias wasn't just a builder, he was an eccentric architect obsessed with sound and silence. The journal detailed his decade-long process of building the original structure, the one that was standing there rotting, not as a cabin, but as an acoustically perfect listening station. He claimed the unique elevation and the specific density of the surrounding redwood forest created a natural sound baffle, and that the creek running through the property produced a frequency that could induce a state of profound peace. His plan, the sanctuary, was an attempt to amplify and harness that natural soundscape. But the journal entry, dated August 14, 1951, was the one that stopped me cold. He wrote about a local land dispute and how he'd been forced to halt construction on his ultimate vision, the sanctuary, by a greedy rival. He wrote that to protect his master plan and the land needed for it, he had secretly transferred the deed to the Core Creek parcel, the high-value land that made the whole project possible, into a trust accessible only by his direct descendants, hiding the deed and leaving the cryptic note. His last entry, 6 months later, simply read, "They will never hear it now. It is buried." This changed everything. The property wasn't just a ruin, it was the prologue to a secret architectural masterpiece. The broken key wasn't the brass key Ethan gave me. It was the key to this hidden deed, to the fulfillment of Elias Thorne's vision. And the unbuildable wetland wasn't a liability. It was the precise location of Thorne's sound-harnessing masterpiece, the reason he had acquired the land in the first place. I immediately called Marcus, my architect friend, who was still drawing up plans for the modern retreat. I didn't mention the lockbox, the pendant, or the journal. I just told him about the new deed, the huge parcel of land, and the creek that ran through it. "Marcus, forget the original footprint. The property just tripled in size, and I think we need to rethink the whole purpose of the build. It can't just be a luxury retreat. It has to be an experience. It needs to be the sanctuary." Marcus, ever the professional, was excited by the scale, but immediately skeptical about the wetland designation. "Jack, wetland permits are a nightmare. They're borderline impossible unless you can prove the original designation was flawed, or you design something that is completely non-invasive, literally floating or built on stilts. We need a specialist." But then he paused. "Wait a minute. Thorne. Elias Thorne? Didn't he disappear in the 50s? He was kind of a legend in acoustic architecture. If this is his land, this project isn't a retreat, it's a historical restoration with a modern twist. We need to honor his intent, Jack. If we can prove the original intent of the build, the permitting board might just greenlight it under historical preservation statutes, even on the wetland." That was the key. We weren't building over the land. We were finishing a 70-year-old dream. I had the vision, the land, and the journal. The next step was to finance the impossible. I called a high-end auction house in the city and had the sapphire pendant appraised. It wasn't just large. The appraiser confirmed it was an exceptionally rare, flawless cashmere sapphire. The valuation came back at 7 figures. The broken key had led me to a fortune, a purpose, and a mystery. The renovation was officially funded. I sent a photo of the cleared kitchen floor, the hole where the lockbox had been, to Ethan. His reply was instant, furious, and filled with a string of profanities. "You found it! I knew it! Why didn't you tell me you found the box, Jack? That was mine! That was Mom's secret!" His relief at passing on the cabin was instantly replaced by a greedy, blazing jealousy. The demolition was about to begin, but the real family storm had already started brewing. Ethan's phone didn't just blow up with texts, it became a pressurized, white-hot geyser of accusation. He called relentlessly, leaving voicemails that started with genuine confusion and rapidly escalated to full-blown rage, laced with decades of suppressed sibling rivalry. I ignored the calls, texting him a single, measured reply. "Mom left the key, and I found the secret. The box was in the house you abandoned. If you'd shown any interest in more than the tax bill, you might have found it yourself. It's time to focus on the build." That only fueled the fire, but it bought me the silence I needed. I had a colossal undertaking ahead, and I couldn't afford to be dragged back into family drama. I used the sapphire pendant money to hire the best. Marcus, my architect friend, brought in a structural engineering team and a specialist in historical ecological preservation. The first 6 weeks were pure destructive chaos. The old cabin, Whispering Pines, was systematically taken apart piece by piece. We realized quickly that the structure was far beyond saving. The beams were riddled with rot and insect damage. The entire footprint was structurally unsound. Instead of renovating, we were doing a full, meticulous deconstruction, saving the salvageable materials, the old Riverstone fireplace, the wide plank oak flooring, to be integrated into the new build, honoring the spirit of the old place. The initial work on the site revealed something crucial related to Elias Thorne's journal. As the crew cleared the decades of overgrowth around the creek, they uncovered a series of precisely placed, flat granite stones. They weren't paving stones, they were arranged in a vast, complex spiral pattern that terminated exactly where Thorne's sanctuary plans showed the main foundation should be laid. It was a 70-year-old architectural marker, preserved beneath the moss. It was proof that Thorne hadn't just sketched a dream, he had laid the groundwork. This discovery was the tipping point for the permitting board. Marcus argued that the new structure wasn't a development. It was the completion of an existing, historically significant architectural work. We proposed a low-impact design, built on non-invasive pylons that would hover above the wetland, protecting the delicate ecosystem while fulfilling Thorne's vision. The design itself was stunning, a sweeping, minimalist structure made of steel, glass, and reclaimed wood, centered around a massive, acoustically tuned observation deck pointed directly toward the creek. It was designed to capture and filter the sound of the water, just as Thorne's journal described. The day the permits were approved, a bureaucratic miracle that took 3 agonizing months and countless lawyer fees, I finally allowed myself a moment of victory. But that victory was short-lived, because that's when Ethan arrived, unannounced. He showed up in a battered rental car, pulling onto the muddy construction site wearing an expensive suit and an expression of utter disbelief. The old cabin was gone. The site was now a symphony of heavy machinery and focused, busy people. He walked right past the danger construction zone signs, dodging pylons and power cables, until he was standing face to face with me, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. "What is this, Jack?" His voice was low and shaking, not with anger, but with a bewildered sense of loss. "You said you were going to fix it up, maybe flip it. What is this glass monstrosity? You demolished Mom's place. You wiped it off the map." "It was already wiped off the map, Ethan," I replied, keeping my voice level. "It was a health hazard, a financial sinkhole, and a ghost. I'm building a legacy. I'm building the sanctuary." I briefly explained the discovery of Thorne's plans, the deed, and the fact that the original structure was meant to be an acoustic experiment, not a cozy cabin. He didn't care about the historical context or the architectural significance. He only cared about the wealth I was suddenly commanding. "You sold the sapphire. I know you did. That pendant belonged to Dad's side of the family. You funded this entire circus with stolen collateral. You found the family secret, and instead of sharing it, you turned it into a spectacle for yourself." He demanded a full accounting of the lockbox contents and a guaranteed 50% split of the finished property's value. I looked him straight in the eye. "You tossed me a broken key and walked away. You didn't want the burden. You didn't want the work. The only thing you put into this property was the final act of abandonment. I took the risk, I did the work, I funded the vision. You're entitled to nothing." That was the turning point in our relationship. The rage in his eyes was palpable. He didn't scream or shout. He just gave me a look of cold, calculating hatred that I had never seen before. "You think this land is just about wood and glass, Jack? You think it's just about Thorne's stupid acoustic plans? There are things buried deeper than foundation stones here. You haven't finished the story. You just found the beginning of the curse." He turned on his heel and walked away, disappearing into the woods, leaving me standing amidst the busy chaos of the construction site, feeling a profound, unsettling sense of dread. His cryptic warning hung in the air, things buried deeper than foundation stones. I tried to rationalize it as empty threats, the bitterness of a man who realized he'd thrown away a fortune. But the conversation pushed me to reread Elias Thorne's journal. I went back over every entry, searching for something more, something darker. Thorne's obsession with acoustic perfection had led him down strange paths. He mentioned experimenting with sound frequencies and even claimed the creek's unique sound had an effect on the human psyche. Then, buried deep within a technical appendix about the granite spiral, I found a sketch that hadn't registered before. It was a cross-section of the proposed foundation, detailing a second, smaller substructure beneath the main deck, accessed only by a hidden shaft. He didn't call it a cellar or a crawl space. He called it the quiet room. The journal explicitly stated it was a space designed for complete anechoic silence, a place where the creek's sound could be shut out entirely. The entry explained that sometimes the sound was too much, and that he needed a space to decompress from the frequency. The language was strange, almost frantic. The existence of the quiet room suggested that Thorne wasn't just building a retreat. He was building a kind of sensory deprivation chamber, a place to escape the very phenomenon he was trying to capture. This detail, kept secret from Marcus and the crew, became my next obsession. Ethan's warning suddenly felt less like a brother's rage and more like a macabre riddle. Ethan's ominous warning, things buried deeper than foundation stones, coupled with the discovery of Thorne's hidden design for the quiet room under the main deck, cast a long, unsettling shadow over the entire project. The construction was moving at a furious pace, but every time the heavy machinery churned up the earth, I found myself watching, half expecting some dark secret to emerge from the mud. I knew I couldn't trust Ethan, but the genuine fear in his eyes when he talked about things buried was hard to dismiss as simple jealousy. I decided to keep the existence of the quiet room a complete secret from Marcus and the construction crew. I couldn't risk the permitting board revoking our hard-won approval, especially if Thorne's secret chamber involved any unlisted historical remains, or worse, something truly sinister. I needed to investigate the substructure design myself. I waited until the foundation pylons were securely set, providing a safe framework, and then, using the coordinates from Thorne's annotated sketch, I went down into the dirt beneath where the main deck would eventually hover. It was a claustrophobic, dirty job, involving hours of careful excavation by hand, illuminated by a single headlamp. The soil was thick and heavy, full of wet clay and tangled roots. About 4 feet down, my shovel hit something hard, not rock, but concrete. I worked feverishly, eventually uncovering a small, perfectly square hatch, sealed shut with a thick layer of what looked like tar and industrial-grade adhesive. This was definitely the quiet room. The exterior was covered in the same kind of elegant, looping symbols I had seen etched in the margins of Thorne's journal, symbols he claimed were acoustic dampeners. Prying open the hatch was an ordeal. I used a jackhammer for the adhesive and a crowbar for the rusted bolts. When the seal finally broke, the rush of air that escaped wasn't damp or musty, but dry, cold, and strangely sterile, like opening an antique refrigerator. The small chamber beneath was lined completely with smooth, thick lead sheeting, floor to ceiling, exactly as described in Thorne's technical diagrams for an anechoic chamber. It was built not just to keep sound out, but to trap the absence of sound in. I climbed down into the space. It was barely big enough for one person to sit cross-legged. As soon as the hatch closed above me, the silence was absolute. Not quiet. Absolute silence. It was immediately disorienting and deeply unnerving. The lack of acoustic feedback was so profound that I could hear the blood rushing in my own ears, a loud, relentless drumming that quickly became the dominant sound. I felt a pressure building behind my eyes and a wave of nausea. Elias Thorne hadn't just built a quiet room, he'd built a sensory vacuum. And then I saw the writing, scrawled directly onto the smooth lead wall, illuminated faintly by my headlamp, were words that were not Thorne's elegant script, but frantic, desperate block letters. He can still hear it. The writing was deeply scratched into the lead, clearly done by someone in a state of extreme distress. I checked the surrounding area, and a few inches lower, a date was scratched in, 9/2/1953. This date was 2 years after Thorne's last known journal entry. It meant someone else had been down here, trapped or hiding, long after Thorne supposedly vanished. I scrambled out of the chamber, shaking off the profound silence like an unwelcome physical weight. The construction noise above sounded deafeningly loud, a welcome sign of life and reality. I immediately called Ethan, throwing caution to the wind. "Ethan, I need to know what you meant. You talked about things buried deeper than foundation stones. Who was down there? Who wrote on the wall?" He didn't sound angry this time, only deeply, profoundly terrified. "You found it, didn't you? The quiet room. Mom found the room years ago, but she never told Dad. She only told me. She saw the writing, Jack. She used to say the cabin was haunted, not by a ghost, but by a sound. The sound of the creek, amplified by Thorne's plans. She said whoever was down there, they went insane listening to the silence, or maybe listening to the creek when they came out." He dropped the real bombshell then. "The person who scratched that on the wall, Jack? It wasn't Thorne. It was his rival, the one he drove mad trying to block the construction. Thorne didn't disappear. He locked the man who tried to sabotage him in that room, left him there to lose his mind, and then vanished himself. That's why Mom kept the deed and the secret, to keep the whole family out of the mess. And now you've not only opened the room, you've built your monument directly on top of it. You brought the curse back." The story was insane, terrifying, and just plausible enough to explain the scratch marks, the lead lining, and Ethan's chilling desperation. Thorne's legacy wasn't just beautiful architecture, it was a psychological tomb. The luxurious retreat I was building was essentially a 70-year-old murder site. I realized then that Ethan's rage wasn't just about money, it was fear that I was disturbing something that needed to remain buried. I hung up, the implications of his story hitting me like a physical blow. I had to contain this. If the authorities, or worse, the construction crew, found out the true, macabre history of the site, the entire project, my fortune and my future would collapse. I immediately returned to the hatch, sealing it shut with quick-drying industrial cement, determined to permanently erase all trace of the quiet room. I had to ensure that my luxury retreat was built on a clean slate, even if that slate was a lie. The only key that mattered now was the one to the truth, and I was burying it again. Sealing the quiet room with cement was a frantic, desperate act of preservation, not of history, but of my own solvency and sanity. I worked under the cover of a fabricated foundation leak story, ensuring the crew saw only me mixing and applying the sealant. I told them the minor structural issue was solved, but the truth was, I was sealing away a potential homicide investigation, a family trauma, and the dark heart of Elias Thorne's architectural dream. The guilt was a cold knot in my stomach, but the alternative, losing the land, the investment, and potentially facing criminal charges for concealing evidence, was unacceptable. I was too deep now. The only way out was through. The construction of the sanctuary accelerated dramatically after that. We moved into the finishing stages, installing the enormous floor-to-ceiling glass panels that would give the retreat its signature panoramic view, and layering the reclaimed oak and stone onto the interior walls. The contrast between the sleek modern design and the dark, hidden history beneath was a constant, unnerving presence. I found myself obsessively listening to the creak, trying to understand the sound that drove Thorne's rival to scratch those desperate words into the lead wall. It sounded like beautiful, rushing water to me, nothing more. But the real trouble began, not with ghosts, but with a highly visible, very public problem: the acoustics. Marcus and his team had been incredibly proud of the centerpiece of the design. The main deck, built over the granite spiral and precisely oriented to maximize the creek's sound experience, fulfilling Thorne's intent. But when the first internal sound tests were run, after all the glass was installed and the space was enclosed, the results were terrifyingly wrong. Instead of the clear, tranquil amplification of the water, the space was filled with a low, resonant hum. It wasn't the sound of the creek. It was a deeply penetrating, rhythmic vibration that seemed to come from the foundation itself. The engineers were baffled. They checked the pylons, the steel frame, and the materials. Everything was structurally perfect. Yet the hum persisted, a frequency so low it was almost felt more than heard, creating a constant, unsettling pressure in the ears. It was unbearable. The space we designed for luxurious tranquility was uninhabitable. Marcus was tearing his hair out. "It's a resonance loop, Jack. Something in the foundation is creating a standing wave, and the glass walls are amplifying it. It's structural feedback, but what is causing it?" I knew, with a gut-wrenching certainty, what was causing it. I had tried to seal away the truth, but the structure itself, Thorne's twisted design, was protesting my interference. By sealing the quiet room, I hadn't neutralized the site. I had turned the entire foundation into a giant subterranean drum. Thorne's acoustic masterpiece had been designed with an escape valve, the quiet room, to manage the frequency. By blocking the valve, I had forced the unbearable resonance into the main living space. I couldn't tell Marcus the truth. I couldn't explain that the solution was to drill through the concrete I had just poured and reopen a deadly historical anechoic chamber. I had to find a technical solution, a counter-frequency. I spent the next 2 weeks poring over Thorne's cryptic journal, specifically the technical appendices detailing his acoustic experiments. I was searching for the inverse, the anti-frequency that could cancel the terrifying hum. I found it buried in a dense calculation, a diagram labeled the resonance nullifier. It described a series of small, precisely weighted brass chimes that needed to be suspended at specific, mathematically derived points within the structure. Thorne claimed these chimes, when struck by the natural air currents moving through the forest, would produce a high-frequency wave that would collide with and neutralize the low-frequency creek hum. The challenge was immediate. The calculation required a specific metal alloy, an archaic mix of brass and copper, and a very specific pure tone. I spent an entire frantic weekend driving through neighboring states, tracking down a highly specialized, isolated craftsman who dealt only in rare historical metals and acoustic instruments. It cost me another small fortune, but within days, I had a dozen unique, heavy brass chimes, each tuned to a microtone that, according to Thorne's calculations, was the antidote. We installed the chimes discreetly, hanging them in hidden alcoves and ventilation shafts throughout the retreat. The day we finished installation and ran the final test, I held my breath. The constant building pressure in my ears was instantly, dramatically gone. The deep, unsettling hum vanished, replaced by an astonishing, crystal-clear acoustic experience. The gentle, amplified rush of the creek, combined with the occasional, ethereal, high-pitched ping of the nullifier chimes. It was breathtakingly beautiful. The space was finally the sanctuary it was meant to be. I had beaten Thorne's curse with his own notes. The very next morning, the article dropped. A glossy 2-page feature in Architectural Digest, complete with stunning photographs of the finished retreat, calling it a breathtaking fusion of historical intent and modern minimalism. The article mentioned the history of Elias Thorne, the Hidden Creek parcel, and the staggering valuation of the finished property, now listed in the tens of millions. That's when Ethan's phone truly blew up. And this time, he wasn't calling me. He was calling his lawyer. The Architectural Digest feature was the official cannon blast announcing my success, and the immediate, chaotic fallout from Ethan was deafening. His lawyer didn't call. They filed. Ethan sued me for everything: misappropriation of family assets, the sapphire; fraud, concealing the contents of the lockbox; and, most aggressively, for ownership of the property based on the premise that the original deed transfer was made under duress and invalid, or, at the very least, that the new, high-value land should have been legally partitioned between us as direct heirs. The court battle was instant, expensive, and viciously public. My defense was ironclad on the surface. The original deed was legally transferred to me. The sapphire was sold to fund the renovation of the property, not for personal gain. I had taken a derelict, unsaleable property and, through sheer risk and investment, created a monumental fortune. Legally, Ethan had given me the broken key and walked away from the burden. But Ethan and his legal team focused on the emotional and historical narrative, painting me as a ruthless younger brother who had plundered a hidden family trust. They hammered on the fact that I had concealed the existence of the lockbox and its contents, arguing this proved my intent to defraud. They even tried to subpoena the historical documentation, meaning Elias Thorne's journal. I knew if the journal was introduced into evidence, the whole edifice, my carefully constructed lie about the quiet room and the dark history of the site, would collapse. I had to protect the journal. I couldn't risk the police finding the evidence of the 1953 inscription and linking it to a cold case. I kept it locked in a safe deposit box, claiming it was lost in the initial demolition chaos. But Ethan was persistent, fueled by a terrifying blend of jealousy and genuine fear about the land's cursed history. The final, climactic twist came not in the courtroom, but back at the sanctuary. Ethan, desperate, found a way onto the property during a brief rain-soaked afternoon when the small on-site security detail was taking a meal break. He wasn't there to steal or vandalize. He was searching for proof of the cabin's dark past to support his case about the land being tainted. I found him in the heart of the retreat, standing exactly where the main deck should have provided tranquil silence, but he was holding his hands over his ears, his face pale and contorted. "It's still here, Jack. I can hear it. The sound. It's buried, but it's coming through the floor. You didn't stop it. You just masked it." I listened, straining. The only sounds were the soft, ethereal pings of the nullifier chimes and the rushing water. The hum was gone. "There's nothing, Ethan. The acoustics are perfect. You're hearing things." He screamed, not at me, but at the floor. "The rug! Mom put the rug there to block the sound." But she heard things too, Jack. She used to talk about the man who was locked in the silence and how sometimes, when the wind was just right, you could hear him scratching. It hit me then. The brass chimes, while neutralizing the low-frequency hum, were doing something else entirely. The high-pitched tones were creating a near-perfect acoustic environment, a kind of hypersensitive listening field. I realized that the combination of the specific chimes and the anechoic lead lining below might be creating a phenomenon where the structure was subtly transmitting sounds, not just of the creek, but perhaps even the ancient vibrations of the earth itself, or the terrible memory of a man's final, desperate struggle. As I listened, a faint, almost subliminal sound emerged, a ghostly scraping that seemed to vibrate through the very soles of my feet. It was so faint, so high frequency, that I might have dismissed it as the wind catching the glass, but the look on Ethan's face told me he heard it too, amplified by his paranoia and fear. The chimes had made the structure too sensitive. The truth was not just buried, it was being broadcast on a barely perceptible frequency. Ethan finally collapsed, the pressure and fear overwhelming him. He wasn't malicious in that moment, just broken, his sanity shredded by the terrifying echoes of the past. I called the security team, not the police. They found him catatonic, mumbling about silence and scratching. He was admitted for observation, and the lawsuit, deprived of its star witness and driving emotional force, immediately lost momentum. The court battle ended not with a bang, but a quiet, anticlimactic settlement. Ethan received a minor, non-controlling percentage of the annual profits, with a binding non-disclosure agreement that effectively silenced him about the cabin's true history. I retained full ownership and operational control. The sanctuary opened 3 months later to global acclaim. It became the most exclusive, in-demand luxury retreat in the country, a beacon of modern, sustainable architecture. Guests rave about the profound tranquility and the unique, soothing acoustic environment of the main deck. They talk about feeling closer to nature, about the absolute peace. They don't know the peace comes at a cost, that I have to constantly monitor the wind patterns and atmospheric pressure, praying the conditions never align perfectly to amplify the faint, high-pitched scratching that I now hear too. I live in my masterpiece, a luxury cage built on a lie, constantly listening for the sound of a desperate, long-dead man. The broken key didn't just unlock a cabin, it unlocked a curse, and every dollar I earn is paid in the currency of perpetual dread. I finally rebuilt the family legacy, but I'm the only one who knows the price of its perfection.